In the early days of the 20th century, America was changing. Factories were rising and cities were growing, and a game was capturing the nation's heart. That game was baseball. It was played on dusty fields and in grand new stadiums. Out of the rural South, from a mill town in South Carolina, came a young man named Joseph Jefferson Jackson. He was a baseball player unlike any other. He could not read or write, a fact he hid for most of his life. But he could hit a baseball. He could hit it with a grace and power that seemed almost supernatural. His bat, which he called Black Betsy, was an extension of his own arms, a tool he wielded with poetic force. Jackson began his journey in the textile mill leagues. He was just a boy then, working long hours in the mill and playing baseball for the company team. His talent was raw and undeniable. It did not take long for professional scouts to notice him. They saw a player with natural instincts, a swing so pure it was said to be a thing of beauty. He made his way to the major leagues, playing for teams like the Philadelphia Athletics and the Cleveland Naps. He was quiet and shy, often uncomfortable in the big cities. But on the baseball diamond, he was a giant. He spoke with his bat, and his bat spoke volumes. The story of how he got his famous nickname is a piece of baseball folklore. One hot summer day, during a minor league game in his home state of South Carolina, he was wearing a new pair of cleats. The spikes were stiff and uncomfortable, and they started to give him painful blisters. He couldn't stand it any longer, so he took the shoes off. He went up to bat in just his socks. As he rounded the bases after getting a hit, a fan from the opposing team shouted, "You shoeless son of a gun!" The name stuck. From that day forward, he was known to the world as Shoeless Joe Jackson. His popularity grew with every season. Fans were drawn to his incredible skill and his humble country background. He was not a polished, city-bred star. He was one of them, a working man who just happened to be one of the greatest baseball players alive. The legendary Babe Ruth himself would later say that he copied Jackson's swing. That is how good he was. He was a hero to the common fan, a symbol of natural, God-given talent. He played the game with an earnestness that people loved, a pure joy that shone through every time he stepped onto the field. By 1919, Shoeless Joe was the star outfielder for the Chicago White Sox. The team was one of the best in baseball, a powerhouse that was heavily favored to win the World Series against the Cincinnati Reds. But there was a darkness gathering around the team. The players, including stars like Jackson, were famously underpaid by their owner, Charles Comiskey. This resentment created an opening for gamblers to move in. They saw an opportunity. They approached a group of the players with a plan to lose the World Series on purpose, and they would be paid far more than their winner's bonus. It was a temptation that some could not resist. The details of what happened next have been debated for over a century. A conspiracy was formed. 8 members of the White Sox, forever known as the Black Sox, agreed to throw the series. Shoeless Joe's involvement has always been the most controversial part of the story. He was approached and offered money. He reportedly tried to tell the team owner about the fix, but Comiskey refused to see him. Jackson played magnificently in the series. He had 12 hits, a World Series record at the time. He hit the series' only home run. His batting average was an incredible .375. He played like a man who wanted to win. But the White Sox lost the series. Rumors of a fix began to spread almost immediately. The public was shocked. How could their heroes betray the game they loved? A grand jury was convened in 1920 to investigate. Shoeless Joe Jackson was called to testify. It was outside the courthouse that a famous, perhaps mythical moment occurred. A young boy is said to have approached his hero, with tears in his eyes, and pleaded, "Say it ain't so, Joe." That simple phrase captured the heartbreak of a nation. It was a plea for innocence in the face of a terrible betrayal. Jackson admitted to the grand jury that he had accepted money from the gamblers. He claimed he played his best and never agreed to throw any games. But he had taken the money. This confession would seal his fate. The players' grand jury testimonies mysteriously vanished, and they were acquitted of any criminal charges in court. The courtroom erupted in cheers, and the players thought they were free. But the new commissioner of baseball, Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis, had other ideas. He was determined to restore the public's faith in the game, no matter the cost. Judge Landis issued a statement that would change baseball forever. He declared that regardless of the jury's verdict, no player who throws a game No player who sits in a conference with crooked players and gamblers where the ways and means of throwing games are discussed will ever play professional baseball. With those words, Shoeless Joe Jackson and the 7 other Black Sox were banned from the game for life. At the age of 32, at the very peak of his career, one of the greatest players the sport had ever seen was cast out. His career was over in an instant. The banishment was a devastating blow. Shoeless Joe returned to the South, a man stripped of his profession and his honor. He ran various businesses, including a liquor store in Greenville, South Carolina. He played in semi-professional outlaw leagues under assumed names for a time, but he could never return to the grand stage of Major League Baseball. He lived the rest of his life in the shadow of the scandal. He maintained his innocence until the day he died, insisting that he never intentionally made an error or failed to get a hit. He played to win, he always said, and his statistics from that fateful series seemed to support his claim. Public opinion was deeply divided, and it remains so to this day. Some saw Jackson as a tragic figure, a simple, uneducated man who was caught up in a scheme he didn't fully understand. They believed he was unfairly punished. They pointed to his outstanding performance in the 1919 World Series as proof of his innocence. He was a victim, they argued, of greedy gamblers, and a vengeful commissioner who needed to make an example of someone. To them, his banishment was a grave injustice, a punishment that did not fit the crime, especially for a man of his immense talent. Others saw it differently. To them, he was guilty by association. He knew about the fix. He accepted the money. Even if he played his best, he had betrayed the integrity of the game by taking part in the conspiracy. For these people, Judge Landis did the right thing. He had to be ruthless to save baseball from the corrupting influence of gambling. In their eyes, Joe Jackson was a fallen hero who had made a terrible choice. He had broken the sacred trust between the players and the fans, and for that, there could be no forgiveness. Shoeless Joe Jackson passed away in 1951, never seeing his name cleared. He died just before the Baseball Hall of Fame was set to consider his case. For decades, his story was a cautionary tale, a sad chapter in baseball's history, but his legend never completely faded. It lived on in the stories told by old-timers, in the statistics that still rank him among the all-time greats, and in the hearts of those who believed in his innocence. His lifetime batting average of .356 is the 3rd highest in the history of Major League Baseball, a testament to his incredible, undeniable talent. In modern times, his story has found a new audience. Books have been written and movies have been made, most famously Field of Dreams, which portrayed him as a ghost seeking redemption on a magical baseball field in Iowa. This portrayal cemented his image as a tragic hero, a symbol of lost innocence and the enduring power of the game. The film brought his story to a new generation of fans, many of whom began to question the fairness of his lifetime ban. The debate over whether he belongs in the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown continues to rage with passionate arguments on both sides. The question of Shoeless Joe Jackson is about more than just one man's guilt or innocence. It forces us to think about justice, forgiveness, and the very soul of sport. Was he a flawed hero who made a mistake, or a willing participant in a crime against the game? Can we separate the flawed man from the gifted athlete? Should his incredible achievements on the field be erased because of one dark moment off the field? These are not easy questions, and they don't have simple answers. They are part of what makes his story so compelling and so timeless. Ultimately, the legend of Shoeless Joe Jackson endures because it speaks to something deep within us. It is a story about raw talent and human frailty. It is a story about a man from a simple background who flew too close to the sun and was burned. It reminds us that our heroes are not perfect, that life is complicated, and that some stories do not have a happy ending. But it also reminds us of the beauty of the game he played so well, a beauty that even a great scandal could not completely tarnish. Shoeless Joe remains baseball's great enigma, forever playing on the field of our memory.